I think I take very little for granted. And I think I take even less for granted than you might think. I told you that I don't take it for granted that you can all sit here peacefully, you know. And that is how I look at the world, is that if it isn't burning in rack and ruins, then I think it's a bloody miracle. And the fact that things have gone well for me and that I'm still standing, which is also a miracle of sorts, you know. I mean, there were probably 30 different scandalous episodes that that anyone with any sense would have thought would finish me. And they've all backfired. And that's also... I also don't understand that. It's like, I don't understand that. I get attacked in the New York Times, and my friends call me, who are New York Times readers, and they say, you've had it this time, because that was the New York Times, you know. You're not going to recover from that. And I think, well, that's probably true. I mean, I was expecting it to happen all along, and then I wait, and then, you know, everybody clamors at me, and then I don't respond too much to that, and it starts to die away, and then all the supporters come out. And then there's 100 people who clamor and 10,000 supporters. And, you know, here's something I can tell you about my life that's really remarkable. So, you know, if you just read the press, well, you'd have all sorts of ideas about me. I mean, you know, that I'm a bigot in the broadest possible sense. And so that's, you know, racist, sexist, homophobic, ethnocentric, white nationalist, alt-right, all of those things. And you'd think that there was just nothing but hatred, although I have been treated well by many journalists. But you could easily get that sense that, like, I live in a world where I'm surrounded by hatred. And that is absolutely not true. It's so not true that it's, you know, there are lies, and then there are anti-truths. And an anti-truth is even worse than a lie. It's like the ultimate form of lie. And that isn't what my life is like at all. What my life is like is that I travel with my wife, and wherever we go, and I mean that literally, wherever we go. We've been to, I don't know how many countries in the last year. It's like, I don't know how many. 30, 40, many countries. If I go down the street, or if I'm in an airport, or if I'm in a cafe, or if I'm in a movie theater, or if I'm in a mechanic's shop, some person comes up to me every 10 minutes and says, I hope I'm not disturbing you. And they're very, very polite. And they say, I've been listening to your lectures, or I've been watching your YouTube videos, or I read your book, and I was in this dreadful place 6 months ago, and then they tell me a little bit about the particulars of that little corner of hell they were ensconced in. And then they say, well, I've been trying to develop a vision for my life, or I've been trying to take more responsibility, or I've been trying to be grateful for my job, mundane though it may be, or I've decided that I'm going to try to put my family together and make peace, and I've really been trying, and it's really working, and things are way better, and thank you. Well, I'm miserable, and I'm anxious, and I'm bitter, and I'm angry, and I'm stuck in my career, and I don't seem to be able to get anywhere, and God damn it, life isn't worth living anyways, and so half the time I'm suicidal. Okay, you know, right? Now we've established the problem domain, right? At least somewhat. And then I would say, well, hypothetically, you'd rather that some of that wasn't the case, right? So because we want to establish a goal, what is it you want? More misery or less misery? And usually by the time people had come to therapy, unless they were mandated to do so, which never works, by the way, they wanted things to be better. That's why they were there.
Now and then you get someone who is there just to, maybe please someone else, but I could usually get beyond that, because if they were willing to come there was at least a part of them that was hoping that there was such a thing as up. And then we'd just walk through their life. It's like, okay, well, let's do an assessment. Do you have any friends? How often do you see them? Well, I have 6 friends, but I only see them once every 6 months, one of them every 6 months. Well, that's pretty low on the friendship hierarchy. So I just file that away as a piece of evidence. Do you have an intimate relationship? Are you as educated as your intelligence would indicate might be useful? Do you have a job? Do you have a career? Or failing that, a job? Right? Because generally people need at least a job and perhaps hopefully a career. How do you regulate your drug and alcohol use? Because that's a major pitfall for people. How do you use your leisure time? How do you take care of yourself mentally and physically? Now, that's not everything about life, right? But if you don't have any of that, well, we have a place to start then, like maybe you should try to make one friend, and there are ways of doing that. So, for example, one of the things that my wife and I used to do when we moved to a new place, which we did fairly often, was we'd pick some local hangout place, restaurant, bar, something like that, and we just go there every week. And until we started to know at least the proprietors, we'd introduce ourselves and we'd make that a routine. And then, you can get to know people. And sometimes with my clients, I would have to, some of them were incredibly not socially skilled, like in ways you just have no idea. Well, maybe some of you do. How? Well, because I don't mean you specifically, although maybe I do, but you certainly may know people like this. I had one client who was literally so socially anxious he could not use a telephone. And so he was he was absolutely terrified of people. He'd been horribly bullied. He was 3/4 deaf. He had obsessive compulsive disorder. He had an intellectual impairment. I mean, this guy had a rough time, man. And he was so terrified he could hardly talk to men and women, man. They were so terrifying to him. He just didn't even know literally where to start. Well, sometimes when people are extremely impaired, they don't know anything basic. They have no friends. Why? Well, they introduce themselves like this. What's your name? And then maybe you say it, but they're so preoccupied that they don't hear it, and then they shake hands. So let's shake hands. That's not good. That's not good. You don't remember the name. You're not making eye contact, so you can't see the person's emotional response, and then you're afraid, and that's why you're looking away. And then because you're afraid and you're looking away, you don't pick up the social cues about how to initiate conversation, even if you know how to do that. So then you're awkward, and because you're looking away, you don't listen, and then you can't enter into the flow of conversation. And so we'd practice shaking hands, maybe 20 times till the person could do it and was comfortable with it. And, that's how you start at the bottom of things. I mean, the guy had a lot of obstacles standing in his way. And so we had to find, a place to start. But we would set those 7 goals. It's like, well, maybe you could have a friend or 2, and maybe you could do something that would educate yourself to some degree. And maybe we can take some steps towards moving you towards a job. With him, I started trying to get him a volunteer job, which you'd think would be easy, but which is actually practically, just so you know it, when you're thinking about people struggling at the bottom who are unemployed, why don't they get a volunteer job, say, to start them in the process? It's bloody well harder to get a volunteer job than a real job. You need a police check for most volunteer positions if they deal with personal care, because people are so afraid of litigation. And for someone who's basically illiterate and also who has extreme social anxiety, the whole police check thing wasn't working. And I sent him to an employment office, and they said, well, type up your resume and distribute it. It's like, that's real helpful. He can't type. He's barely literate. He's never used a computer. He doesn't know what a resume is even. It's like, type up your resume and distribute it. Jesus, how pathetic. So one of the things you do if you negotiate with yourself is you set a goal and then see if you move towards it. And if you don't, well, maybe it's the wrong goal. Maybe it's too large. Maybe it's too small for you, right? So now it's not engaging you. Maybe you didn't really want to pursue that goal and you're just deluding yourself. And it's helpful to have someone to talk those things over with, but I would say start from if you're not doing what you want to do or what you think you should be doing, drop the presumption that you know who you are and start to negotiate with yourself like you're a stranger who needs to be enticed forward.